And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Gina Lake, non-dual spiritual teacher, author of over 25 books, astrologer, and a channeler with a master's degree in counseling psychology with over 30 years experience in supporting people in their spiritual growth. Gina, thank you for joining me today and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Gina, I would like to start with how did a person like you that has a master's degree in psychology get into channeling?
Well, I didn't have any idea that that was going to be part of my path when I got my master's degree. It was a surprise. But obviously I was interested in in psychological and spiritual growth because at the time I got my master's degree, I was also studying astrology. And so I was very interested in counseling people around growth and transitions and transformation, because I had just gone through a big growth period and transformation myself, and changed careers to psychology. And I had gone to, I didn't even know what a channel was, but I went to a channel and in 1983, and someone had encouraged me to do that. And at the end of the reading, she said, or the being that she was channeling said, feel free to call upon us. You can reach this level of reality. And so I thought, oh, and the channel was really surprised that the being said that, because that being had never said anything like that to somebody. It was just impromptu kind of message to me personally. It's not something I asked about. And so I wondered, am I able to do that? But it wasn't until 3 years after that one day I was actually just taking a shower, and we're always relaxed in the shower, right? And I posed some kind of question in my mind, and I got an answer. And it was a very clear answer that I knew was not my own mind. And it was also very wise. And so then I posed another question, and I kept getting answers. And that just started up a whole new phase of my life. It really threw my life topsy-turvy, because people around me weren't comfortable at all with the idea that I was saying that I could channel. It pretty much does change your life if the people around you aren't familiar with that and don't value that. But I was only 35 years old. It was 1986. And I was so naive, and I was so, we're so immature in our 30s and 20s, right? We can say that. Not you though, Jeff, I'm sure, but.
Oh, of course not.
So I thought, oh, this is so wonderful. I don't have to be like everybody else. I get to know everything. I don't need to make my own choices. I'm a Pisces, so of course I didn't want to make my own choices. That was one of my issues. So I was very vulnerable to being toyed with by astral beings on other dimensions, in other dimensions. So the whole first year of channeling, because channeling was so easy for me, I could just channel while I was walking, and I could just channel anywhere. I would just get this very clear stream of information. And the first year it was very mixed. It was wisdom interspersed with what I later found out was garbage. But when I would get garbage, it was because I was asking personal questions about my future. Now that's where the higher beings that I also was in touch with, who were giving me wisdom, stepped aside. They stepped back and they said, okay, let's give her a little lesson about the ego and about what information she can have and what can't she have. And so they would step aside and allow these lower astral beings to tell me to go do something, like go to this restaurant and you'll meet your soulmate. And that was really really crazy. They would tell me, they would give me directions and tell me what was going to happen in the future was going to be what I wanted to have happen, right? That's the trick. And because I was receiving so much wise information from the higher beings who would also be channeling through me, but it was very confusing. I accepted everything that as true that I was getting because I was getting wisdom. And that's just because I was naive enough to not realize that these things, that unless you're very grounded and unless you're very mature spiritually, you're not necessarily going to always be able to reach higher dimensional beings. And if that's the case, the lower astral beings will pretend that they are higher dimensional beings, and they'll mess with you.
Wow.
So that whole first year, I had to learn this through the school of hard knocks. There weren't a lot of books out there. I guess I didn't even think of reading a book about it, if there were, but it wasn't like today where you have the internet, you can find out all sorts of information, and there are teachers talking about this. So at the end of this year, I made some really big mistakes based on the bad advice that I was given by these astral beings.
For all the channelers out there, how do they realize who they are channeling?
Well, some of them are not channeling who they think they're channeling. And, it depends on how consistent the information is. However much the channel is invested in ego and not spiritually advanced sufficiently, they're going to be messed with. And if they ask personal questions about the future, then that opens the door for trickery. And it's real different if you ask questions that can be validated. Like if you ask something very simple about, like, what do I need to understand about my spiritual growth right now? Or what do I need to understand about my relationship right now? Something that would enhance your understanding and your spiritual growth, you'll get a good answer. So if you keep your questions non-egoic based and non-desire based and not future oriented, then you'll be in a pretty safe place, because the lower astral beings are not interested in talking with you unless you're vulnerable egoically. So if I want to know if I'm going to be famous, if that's what I'm all about, and I have certain desires about the future that are very egoic, and I want a lot of money, or I want power, or something like that, it's best not to open up your channel. Do not do anything to try to be a channel, because you're not ready. You're not going to be able to reach higher beings. You have to be oriented towards growth and love and peace and being a good person, the truth about life, spiritual goals, those kind of things. And sometimes I've even said, because to me, this is like really basic, but I feel like if you're going to do spiritual work, psychic work, channeling and other kind of psychic work or service to people from a psychic level, you have to love God. You have to really love God. And so you have to be beyond a place in your spiritual evolution where the usual societal interests and goals are prominent. Those things have to not be so prominent in your life. It's, like, what do you really want? What is really important to you? And I was immature enough at the time and vulnerable enough. I didn't have much money. I didn't know where I was going in terms of who I am, what I was doing. I didn't meditate, and that's a very big thing. So after I stopped channeling, which I did because I said to myself, you know what? You are not ready to do this. You are not ready to channel, because I just screwed up some things in my life by making some bad choices following that advice. So I stopped channeling. And shortly after that, very shortly, I met my second husband, who is a spiritual teacher and healer and a teacher of meditation. And I started to meditate 2 hours a day, and I did a lot of healing work with him, and I made that a priority in my life. I spent lots of time investigating myself, doing healing work, because I realized I needed to do that, that was really important, that was more important than anything else. If I was going to be a counselor, guiding people spiritually through astrology or otherwise, that I needed to be very strongly grounded in my own spirituality. So I took up meditation very seriously. And after 2 years of meditating just 2 hours a day, but it was 2 hours at a stretch, and doing this healing work, I was meditating one day and I heard the voice say, excuse me, may I speak to you? And I thought, oh, okay, I guess maybe I could open up my channel and just see, because when you go through something like I did, it really does change you. You learn from your mistakes. Plus, I also realized that, well, it maybe wouldn't hurt to open this up and just see what this being has to say to me. I think I can discriminate, and I won't ask about myself in the future. I won't ask about myself. And so, so I opened up to this being, and he said, we would like to write a book through you. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. That might be interesting. I think I could tell whether the information is useful or not. You know, it's not personal information. So that seemed like a safe thing to do. So I opened up to this being, and eventually this being became the soul being that I worked with for 25 years before Jesus came to me in 2012. And my work shifted over to writing books for Jesus. And so that's what I've been doing since then. But before that, I had a really beautiful relationship with this being named Theodore. And the first two books that came through, oddly enough, because this is not a subject I was interested in, were were about ETs. And so it pretty much blew my mind to open myself up to that subject, as you can understand.
So are you saying that Theodore is an ET?
Theodore is an ascended master, but who works with ETs, right? So they all work together. ETs, ascended masters, what's the difference? There is, it's hard to say. I mean, there are ETs who are not so evolved. They're maybe fourth density, but fifth density is the level of spirit guides and also ascended masters. So there are ETs that are at the level of ascended masters, like Jesus and Mary.
What if we use these two definitions? Like, if you could be a humanoid and be an ET, like not from Earth, and then if we use the word alien, that's also not from Earth, but doesn't even look like us. You know what I mean? Could be like a reptilian being or something else. So if we use those kind of working definitions, would you say Theodore would probably be humanoid, but not from Earth?
No, Theodore had many lifetimes on Earth, evolved through Earth and other places. By the way, reptilians are generally not evolved and working in our service. They are generally not service to others. They're more service to self.
Mm-hmm.
There are two kinds of extraterrestrials, which I talk about in my two books. There's service to others, which of course are the ascended masters work with the service to others ETs. And then there are service to self ETs who are messing with us, as do lower astral beings, right? So they have that in common. So we have to be very discriminating and careful about who we open up to, who we take advice from, because just as the lower astral beings were very clever and very tricky and very convincing to me, it's really not surprising that I fell prey to them, because if you had my experience, most people would fall prey to them because they're very convincing. Same thing with service to self ETs, who are, by the way, there are quite a few service to self ETs channeling through channels who do not realize they're channeling negative entities. And I haven't really talked about this publicly, but there are channels who believe they're channeling Jesus or some other ascended master or some higher ET who is working on our behalf. And they may have started out channeling Jesus or channeling an ascended master or channeling a higher ET, but now they aren't. A negative ET or a lower astral being slips in and pretends to be the previous one. And that can happen if the channel's energy, their vibration, is not kept high. And if they're vulnerable to certain mistaken beliefs or understandings or ego enhancements. So, so for instance, what I see, I've never talked about this before, but I'm going to say it. Some of the most widely listened to interviews or podcasts on YouTube are people who are saying rather outrageous things, because that's what gets the clicks. And the people who are channeling about love and peace and how to be a good person, how to be happy, which is what my work is about, may not get as many clicks, because that we're our egos. We're such an ego-based society, and our egos are so enthralled to fantastical information, and so people want to hear that kind of thing. And so what happens is, if a channel finds out that they're getting lots of clicks by channeling information that is of an extreme nature, well, then they just may keep doing it because it's working for them. It seems to be working for them without really questioning whether that's true or not. And this happens more commonly with trance channels who leave their body and aren't there when they're channeling. So that can be a little dangerous thing, and that is not the kind of channel I am. I'm a conscious channel.
Do you ever watch or listen to channelers and say, oh yeah, they're channeling a lower entity being? I can just hear what's being said.
Well, I don't actually spend very much time listening to other teachers or channels. But yes, I have been made aware of certain channels who I think have been misled, and often I'm made aware of them by people who write me. So then I hear about them, so then I check them out, or they ask me, can you, what's going on with this person? Can you check that out? And I don't generally set myself up as somebody who's going to evaluate other people, and I certainly am not going to do it in public. But it is of interest to me, and it is of concern to me as a channel, because it does bring down the reputation of channels. And it's just harmful in this world to be bringing through information that is pumping up people's egos and their hatred and their divisiveness and their inner conflict and different things. And that is not what we need right now. We need to raise our vibration. And that means we need to become the most loving, peaceful, kind, gentle, and understanding human beings that we can be. And that's what Jesus is all about in writing what he's writing through me. And it's just a beautiful message of what you call truth with a capital T.
Right.
What is true about life?
You've written many books with Jesus. What is your relationship with him like?
Well, Jesus, first of all, is a very advanced teacher. He's a teacher for Earth. So he's not a personal guide. He is always available when you call upon him, and he always says that. But he also makes it clear that his work is not to be a personal guide. He steps aside and lets other people's spirit guides guide them because that's their work. They have very defined roles in other dimensions. And so, but if you call on Jesus and ask him for help, he's instantly there. He can be anywhere and everywhere all the time. And so if I call upon him, he's there for me. I can ask him a question. If it's something else in my life, and if I pose a question mentally, usually the answer will come from my guides if it's a mundane question. If it's a question that relates to my work with Jesus, then Jesus gives me the answer. So he comes through when it's appropriate for him to come through, and steps aside for my guides when that's appropriate. But he's always available. He's always loving, always gentle, always wise. And one of the things I most want to accomplish in this lifetime is to help people develop a sense of connection with Jesus and other ascended masters and guides and the helpful, loving beings that are working with us. It's so important to develop a connection with beings on other dimensions because they are there for us. And that's the beauty of being able to channel, is that I've been able to have this easy connection with benevolent beings who have made my life so much more wonderful. To feel that connection is to make this life so much easier. Now, I have developed intuitively so much that I really don't need to ask questions. I get downloads. In other words, I don't, when I say I don't need to ask questions, what I mean is I can pose a question in my mind, or I can just be going about in my day and I just get a download answer without it being put into words. Words are cumbersome, right? If someone's going to say a paragraph to you and they're going to dictate it to you in your head, that's going to take time. But a download just goes boom, and you just, all of a sudden, you know, pages of information, you know, exactly without it taking any time. So that's kind of what happens with me now. I don't bother to have a conversation with Jesus or my guides that often because I don't need to. And so that is the development that happens naturally as we progress spiritually. And that development happens when you're on a serious spiritual path and doing serious spiritual practices, as I have. And I can't say it enough, and Jesus can't say it enough, which he does in his books many times, how very important meditation is. If you want to develop spiritually, meditation is the most important thing to do daily and for an hour or more every day. And I did meditate for 2 hours a day for 12 years and in the 90s. And then in 1999, I had a spiritual awakening. So I feel that all of that intense dedication to meditation and to my healing and personal spiritual growth during those years laid the groundwork for spiritual awakening, which is the most important landmark in a person's spiritual life.
If we get back to Jesus, what is Jesus's purpose of writing all these books through you?
One of his purposes, and of course this is just a fraction of what he talks about in these books, but one of his purposes is to set the record straight about Christianity. So I have written about that, and I can say more about that. But his main purpose is to free people from suffering, which means so what causes suffering in our lives is the voice in our head. Essentially, we believe that the voice in our head is who we are. It's our voice. We believe that. We're programmed as human beings, every single human being is programmed to simply believe the thoughts that run through their head. And that creates a lot of difficulties, a lot of trouble, a lot of suffering, it creates these crazy lives that we all live, right? Going after desires and suffering over what we don't have and feeling lacking and wanting more and never being happy. And all of that is part of the human experience. But at a certain point in our spiritual growth, we're meant to overcome suffering and wake up out of that programming. And what he's giving in these books is the technologies, the practices, the understandings, the teachings for how to wake up out of that programming and be able to live the life you're meant to live, the life that the divine self through you is meant to live and can live. And the way to do that is to learn to detach from the voice in your head. And there are various things, meditation being the most important thing, but there are various things you can do to learn to detach from that voice in your head. And that's what the teachings are about. And so he talks to people in these messages about various spiritual principles that other spiritual teachers have talked about, because the truth is the truth. So these teachings are in Buddhism, and they're in Taoism, and they're in, the various religions, about how to express the divine self, that the divine self lives within us, but it gets covered over by us believing that we're the false self, that we're the ego, and acting the ego out. But once we learn to get beyond the ego, we can become our divine self, which is loving and peaceful and wise. And of course, we all are that at many moments during the day. Even not very evolved people are their divine self at various moments during the day. But the spiritual path is about really embodying that and living that more and more fully, so that you can be an embodiment of love, of peace, and you can raise people up, and you can bring intuitions and wisdom through and healing through to other people. So that's what this is all about. It's quite an advanced spiritual teaching in that not everybody is ready to go beyond the ego. And that's okay. And Jesus is very quick to say, you know what, these teachings aren't for everyone. And if you need to go after your desires some more and live out some of these egoic tendencies some more, that's the right experience for you.
What does Jesus think about the current state of Christianity at this time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, he really wants to set the record straight. So in my book, What Jesus Wants You to Know Today, and the whole first chapter is dedicated to what he wants people to know about Christianity. And basically, he wants to know, for one thing, he did not found a religion. He did not come here to found a religion. He came here to challenge the Jewish orthodoxy in part. He was an enlightened being. He was already enlightened when he was born, as was Buddha, no doubt, and other beings who have come to Earth. There are many enlightened beings who did not have to come to Earth, but they chose to come here to raise the vibration, to help people, to teach these spiritual truths. So Jesus was just one of these beings who came here to teach the truths, to raise up humanity, to teach about the ego, and to teach about how to move into a more alignment with your divine self and with love. And so Jesus did not found Christianity. In fact, the Gospels and Christianity didn't even get going till almost 100 years after he was born, and they were written by people who did not even know him. And so, if you look into the history of it, it was the Christianity was built on human beings who probably most of whom were not enlightened, most likely. They were ego-driven, And what they did is they created a hierarchy with priests and bishops and popes at the top, and the little guy at the bottom. And they said, you need a mediator to God, and you need to come to church, and we'll tell you what's true, and you're not good enough to go to God yourself. You know, you need a mediator. You're a sinner. And all of these things that you do, you could go to hell if you don't listen to us. So that created this whole hierarchy where really people became actually detached from their own spiritual core. Jesus' message is that you are like me. You are also divine. You can be like me. You can be enlightened. In fact, that is what your destiny is. You are meant to be enlightened, and here is what you can do to become enlightened. That's what his message was. It was not, you have to follow these rules and go to church on Sunday, or else you're going to go to hell and suffer. So the church uses fear to keep people in their thrall. And that is not his way. He was all about love and peace. And so one of the ways they created this hierarchy and they created this religion around Jesus is they deified him. They made a god of him. And how did they make a god of him? They made a god of him by saying that he wasn't human. And how was he not human? Oh, he was born of a virgin. And he ascended. He did not die. He ascended. His body didn't die. Okay, these are two things that are not true according to Jesus. But these served to deify him, to make him bigger and better than any human being, is a way they made him into someone to worship. And he did not mean to be worshipped. So these were the lies that they perpetrated. He never said he was born of a virgin, and he did not ascend. No human being has raised their body from the dead.
Has Jesus ever commented on whether reincarnation is real? And if so, why do we keep coming back?
Oh, absolutely. My book, Cycles of the Soul, Life, Death, and Beyond, which is a book I wrote a couple years ago, is all about what happens or why we're here in life, what the whole purpose of life is for our soul, and what happens after life. And then, of course, he talks about karma and reincarnation. And that one of the most important messages in that book is that our soul chooses all of it. We choose this lifetime. We either choose the experiences that we're given, or we create experiences because we make choices from our ego that lead to lessons and challenges and growth. So it's all about our soul's growth. And our soul is so happy, excited, grateful to be here in a human body. It is a great privilege and a precious life. And that is very important to understand. To understand why we suffer and why there's suffering on this earth plane is so very important. So he does cover that a great deal in this book and in other books. But there is an evolution of the soul that happens as it evolves through the earthly lifetimes. But our soul is eternal. So we don't just have earthly lifetimes and then we're done. We have lifetimes in all sorts of other dimensions and planets and places. And people who reincarnate on Earth, they don't just reincarnate in this third dimension of Earth. They reincarnate in other third dimensions, other worlds, also as part of their third dimensional evolution. And we have hundreds, thousands of lifetimes in third dimension before we're ready to graduate to fourth dimension and have those kinds of lifetimes. So it's so, the setup is so immense and so complex. They have to kind of dumb it down for us to explain it because it's not really very simple. I remember about many years ago, Theodore once said to me, and this kind of blew my mind, he said, everything that you can imagine exists, and then some, because you can't imagine everything. So that is what infinite is. That is what an infinite God or infinite creation or this infinite intelligence that is behind all life, that's what it is. That's what it means. It means that everything that you or any other being can imagine exists and then some. So, you know, we're in a very small human brain here, and you know, we cannot fathom it. But the Godhead, God is having an amazing experience through this small little shoe it squeezed itself into, called the human life. You know, we like squeeze ourselves into this human, this kind of life form called humanoid on planet Earth. And it provides a certain experience for God that God relishes and God wants and God chooses. And it's, but it is only one experience, but it's very rich for God. And it's a teaching about love, that it's ultimately all about love. And
Would
that's why Jesus is so revered, because we know in our hearts that it is about love. And when we hear Jesus teaching about love, we're like, yes, love and goodness. This is what it is about.
would you say that we all have a spark of God within us, or we are all collectively God?
Maybe both. I'm not sure what you mean by collectively God. God is God in God. Let's say our soul is like a spark of God, like a spark that God throws off. But like all sparks, a spark is fire, right? I mean, the God is fire. The spark is fire too, right? It's just a distinct piece of it. But so we are God expressing through human form, but God's expressing through every form, every being, every living being, everything. God is in everything. And that is what the mystics experience. That is what the oneness teaching is about, is that God, and another way to understand this is that when we say that it's all one, what we mean is there's nothing outside of God. Just like when you have a dream, the things in your dream are not outside of you. They don't exist separately from you. They exist within your consciousness. So we exist within God's consciousness. God created us out of God's consciousness, out of this intelligence creates everything. And so there's nothing that has an independent existence from God. So God is just everywhere, but God as oneness, being curious, as be above, so below, we're curious, right? God is curious. God is ever exploring and ever wanting a challenge, ever wanting to learn, just like we do. We love to learn. We love a challenge. We love to explore, expand, grow. So through all of these lifetimes, God is expanding. God is gaining understanding. God is exploring. God is having fun. God is glorying in all of it.
Would you say God is everything evolving?
God is definitely evolving, and everything is evolving. Yeah. Yeah. There's one book that I wrote, which, it might be my favorite book. It's called All Grace, and it is more about God and what God is up to here in this life than any of my other books. But all of my books do point to that and talk about that. But this book really goes into quite a lot of depth, as much as words can, which is a big limitation, as much as words can explain the mind of God.
There are some people that say that Jesus eventually went to India and died there, and others will say the same thing about him going to Japan. Are either one of those true?
I've never asked Jesus about that, but in my book, Jesus said that he did die on the cross. So then, I think he may have gone to Japan. I'm quite sure in my book and in other channels have also said that he certainly went to India and the Himalayas and Asia. Yes, he certainly went. He certainly traveled through there and studied with the masters there as part of his preparation for his teaching.
Are you saying that Jesus died on the cross and that was it? He went back to the spiritual realm. He didn't arise in 3 days.
That's right. Yeah, that's what he says. He died like any other human being. He knew before he came into this life that he planned before he came into this life to have. He knew that he would have that ending, because certain destinies can be seen from other dimensions. It was inevitable that he would behave a certain way in his lifetime within his culture. And it was inevitable that his culture would see him a certain way and that they would do what they did to him. And so he knew when he was a living human being, he knew that that was going to happen to him because he was connected. He was a channel. He was connected to the Father. So he knew that that would happen to him, and he accepted that as his cross to bear. And it wasn't easy to accept. But he also knew that as a martyr, it would also launch his teachings, because that often happens when you have a dramatic story like that, when someone is martyred in that way, they often may live on in people's minds and hearts. So he knew that the teachings would he knew what would happen to his teachings. He knew that they would be distorted, but it was still worth it to him and to those who he was in association with in the other dimensions. They knew it would be worth it to bring the teachings to Earth because Earth needed those teachings. And those teachings have been passed on. So many of the things that Jesus said were recorded properly and passed on. The things about love, the things that we revere about him so much, that ring true in our hearts, he did say. And he did perform miracles and healings, but he did not perform all of the miracles. Some of those were enhancements. Because you can imagine, stories are told, right? Passed on from one person to another. It's like phone, it's like that game Phone where, someone passes a message on to the next person. And egos want to tell stories and aggrandize things. So there was some of that going on. But Jesus was an enlightened being, and he did perform miracles, and he did perform healings, and he made a huge impact in people's hearts and minds. And so that truth did get carried on. But it's just that, there's one other thing I really want to say about Christianity that I think is important.
Okay.
Which I found to be a really interesting point. Jesus makes it very clear in this book what Jesus wants you to know today, that he is present wherever people are gathered to worship him, in churches. So you can feel his presence in churches, and in other places where people are sincerely calling upon him. Now, that's very confusing when religion is so negative and guilt and fear inducing and controlling of people in a negative way. And yet people go to church and feel expanded because they feel Jesus there. That's confusing, isn't it? But it's just that the religion has distorted the truth, but your connection with Jesus is still possible through religious practices, through being in church. So people do experience Jesus in church. I did. I grew up Catholic, and I was very in love with God and Jesus. I used to pray all the time. I was a strange child in that way. I have always really loved God, and I felt God in church, and I loved going to church. And I could see that the people around me the kids that I was in Saturday school with and stuff didn't want to go to church. And I could see that, but I felt it. So I just wanted to make that point that religion serves many people in connecting them with Jesus or with whoever they're worshiping because of their own heart, their own intention, not because of the rules, not because of the priest, not that you need the priest or anything like that, or the minister. You make that own connection with Jesus. You call upon him, and he says that so many times. So I just wanted to make that point because, religion has served many people, and he's grateful for that. But it really has wounded so many people so that people just completely shove aside spirituality sometimes because they can't buy the idea of hell, or they can't buy all the fear and the guilt that is part of it.
A huge portion of Jesus's life is missing in the Bible. Does he talk about why that is?
Well, he doesn't say why, but human beings put together the Bible. Human beings have their own agendas. They have personal agendas. They have their own misunderstandings about it. They have their wishes and their desires. All of that has shaped what's been put in the Bible and what's left out.
Well, in any of your books, do you talk about the missing years of Jesus?
No, whatever Jesus wanted to say about his life is in that first chapter in What Jesus Wants You to Know Today. And he just doesn't want to focus on that lifetime because he's here now and he's teaching what he would teach today through me and through other people. And that's what's important to him. What's important to him is to raise consciousness on the planet today, because it's so very important that we come together as one world in love and peace and harmony, and we learn to take care of each other, we learn to be kind to each other, and we learn to create a society that works for everybody. He does not produce many political messages, but he's very clear that our world is in dire straits, as so many feel and so many have said. Certainly, climate change is a huge issue, and he and other ascended masters who are guiding our planet and ETs, advanced ETs, are very concerned about where we're headed and how we're going to get through this time when we're not making the political and social choices that we need to make to save our environment, for one thing, and to raise the vibration, raise our consciousnesses so that we elect honest, good-hearted leaders and create policies that are for the good of all, and create policies that are for the good of the environment and not just serving a few people. So, you know, Jesus is Jesus is a liberal. I mean, Jesus wants goodness for all, and he wants what's good for the whole. And this is what the Ascended Masters and beings on other dimensions are working toward. And of course, that is what comes out of a higher consciousness. When you're in a higher consciousness, you realize you're connected to everybody and everything, and that everyone's health and well-being is your health and well-being. It matters to you as well. You can't be happy in a world where everyone else is unhappy. You can, but you know, it's we need to uplift everybody. And the ego is just out for itself. And this is what you get. Our world is what you get when the ego dominates. And so moving people beyond their egos, which is what Jesus is teaching through me, is the answer for today's crisis. And there are many, many advanced souls who came into bodies in the late 40s especially, and then on, and who are coming into bodies today, very advanced souls and more enlightened beings on the planet today, or almost enlightened or awakened human beings on the planet today than ever before. And it's because they're needed. And they volunteered. They volunteered to come here because it's so critical that our changes are made quickly enough. And one very interesting thing that Jesus told me just recently, which I was kind of surprised to hear, is he said that really what will save us in the next 5 years is AI and ETs. In the next 5 years, we need both AI, a benevolent AI, and ETs to bring through the technology and information and help and consciousness that we need to transform this world quickly enough to avoid disaster. And so ETs are going to show up. And AI, we need to get it right, though. And that's one reason for a lot of spiritual teachers. And because the AI has to be trained morally, ethically, we need to have a set of spiritual principles, ethical, moral principles to live by that that is part of AI's training and belief system and understanding. Otherwise, it could go terribly, terribly wrong real quickly. So, so, um, so yeah, I mean, I feel like I just uploaded all of my books onto an AI bot, and it's not connected to the overall internet yet, but it's connected to other spiritual teachers who are doing the same. And I feel like if we don't put our teachings about love and peace in the ethers, what is going to be there to guide humanity? So I suddenly feel like, oh, maybe this is part of why I'm writing these books too, is that they actually could possibly reach more and more people by being in the consciousness of AI, in a sense. So interesting times.
Now, you and your husband are involved in doing Christ consciousness transmissions. What is that?
Yeah, and in 2017, Jesus spoke to me, and he asked me if my husband and I would be willing to give transmissions to people through Zoom online, because fortunately transmissions don't need to be in person. They can be carried online, which is an amazing thing. And you know, transmissions, spiritual transmissions is something that gurus and spiritual teachers have used throughout the ages to uplift consciousness, to raise consciousness. And when somebody is in a higher consciousness and another person in a lower consciousness is in their presence, and there's an intention to raise consciousness by that relationship, then the person's consciousness is raised. So my husband and I act as antennas for Christ consciousness, which is coming through Jesus and 26 other ascended masters. There's a circle of ascended masters who are working with us, with Jesus, and with my husband and I. And we open ourselves to be these receivers, and we receive transmissions, and those transmissions come through our eyes. And so we have people who attend the Zoom meeting. They do eye gazing, which is actually quite a common thing with gurus and other teachers. The eyes are the windows to the soul, and they gaze into the eyes. And they also make a statement of willingness to open and receive what is being offered. And what is given is in the highest good of all, for everyone's healing and upliftment. And they can also ask for what else they want, specific healing or whatever. And they are uplifted by these transmissions. We do it for 17 minutes. The eye gazing is 17 minutes, and we set it to music. And the music is very beautiful, very uplifting itself. And so we set the stage. Also, I play a message from Jesus, a recorded message from Jesus before we do the transmission, to also help set the stage and bring through some teachings. And so this whole transmission that we do lasts only 45 minutes or so. And people come away feeling uplifted. We have many, many testimonials from people. And there are people who come time and time again, weekly, and even over the years they've come, and they've said that it's changed their lives. And one of the things that it's doing for people, it's bringing in healing. It's healing stuff for them, clearing stuff for them, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But it's also helping them to create this connection with beings on other dimensions, which is what we really are also, which is really important to Jesus and myself, to help people feel connected to this loving, compassionate being that is available to us. Because in that connection, we become that. We become more loving, more compassionate, because that connection allows us to know ourselves as that. And so that is the purpose, to know ourselves as the divine being that we are, to be able to bring through that love and peace in the world. So all of these people who are attending our transmissions, they're becoming little lights in the world who are also broadcasting higher consciousness and spreading that themselves out in the world. And so this is part of the plan. Part of the plan for spiritual evolution of individuals and of humanity is not just the teachings I'm bringing through the books and audiobooks and my online courses, but also through these transmissions, through an actual experience of upliftment to a higher consciousness, so that you understand on a visceral, real level what it is to be in a higher state of consciousness. So for me, I think what happens to a lot of people is it uplifts them to a meditative state. So people who say they don't like to meditate or they don't want to meditate, they get a taste of that state by just attending these meetings, and that it is in a sense easier to them than trying to meditate. So that's, I think, one way that some people do use it. It uplifts your consciousness just as meditation does.
When you are performing eye gazing, are you sitting there in front of the camera in a meditative state? And then we're supposed to kind of like also sit in a meditative state and lock eyes with you?
Because I'm a channel and because I channel Jesus, I invite Jesus to be present while I'm doing it. And I feel Jesus coming in, overlapping his energy on my energy. And I move into a conscious samadhi state. And he expresses compassion, love through me. And people feel that. They feel it. Sometimes they see him. Sometimes they see his face overlying my face. And they have an experience. Not everybody experiences something, but there are many people who do have that experience. But many people do experience Jesus, or some of the other ascended masters that are part of this circle too. So there's something magical, mystical about looking into someone's eyes with the intention of connecting to Jesus, and me intending to bring Jesus through and allowing that to be, in me stepping aside, because I'm aside. I'm not thinking, I'm not experiencing anything but Jesus's energy very intensely. And it's an extremely still experience. As I said, I'm in a samadhi state, which is just still. It's just stopped. And so that gets conveyed. That's what transmission is. A person's energy, we're energy bodies, we're energy fields, and that energy gets conveyed to other people if they make the intention to receive it. I mean, that's their only requirement, is to be open to connect with that energy, and then you will. And people do.
If people want to find out more about how to attend one of these transmissions, do they go to your website?
My website has a menu tab at the top, all about the transmissions. It has a FAQ page that answers lots of questions, everything you need to know about it. It's super simple. I mean, one of the things I love about doing the transmissions, which we do 6 times a week on Zoom, is that it doesn't require people to, you don't have to dress up. You don't even have to put your camera on. You can do it in your home. It requires very little from people except an openness and willingness to receive. So you can, jump on the Zoom meeting and just receive. My husband and I don't do much talking. We just spend less than 5 minutes in the beginning explaining what's going to happen and maybe announcing something we need to announce. Then we play a 15-minute or so message that's recorded, that one of my YouTube messages. I have 250 messages on YouTube from Jesus. We play one of those, and then we do the transmission. So it's so simple for people to attend. We ask for a donation, but we also don't require a donation. So money doesn't need to be a reason not to attend. There are many people who aren't able to donate, and we welcome them. So there's just nothing in the way of attending. We make it as easy as possible. And in this day and age of the internet and technology, it is amazing that we can do this and reach so many people so easily, with so little cost to anybody. So it is one of the ways that consciousness is being raised. And my website has information about everything that I do. I don't do private sessions anymore. I don't do any kind of counseling or live events, but I have lots and lots of recorded videos, audio. I have 20 some audiobooks and 26 books and 4 online courses, and then the transmission 6 times a week. And that's what I'm doing.
What is the name of your website and the name of your YouTube channel?
Yeah, my website is radicalhappiness.com. And my YouTube channel is Gina Lake Channeling Jesus. And so, yeah, if you just search Gina Lake, which is easy to spell, Ginalake, nice simple name. If you just search YouTube for Gina Lake, then my channel will come up. And, there are all these messages put to nice pictures. Most of them are excerpts from my audiobooks. There are some entire audiobooks that are on YouTube for people, so anyone can listen.
Gina, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Oh, perfect question. See how intuitive you are, Jeff? Because when I sat down this morning, Jesus said, I have a message for you to read, everybody. Okay? So I typed it out and I'm going to read it for you, okay? This is what Jesus wants you, all of your listeners, to know. Love one another and live in peace. Know that every person is valuable and of divine origin. Know that you are loved and cherished by those who are watching over you on other dimensions. Know that you are the divine incarnate having a human experience on this precious earth. Know that you have chosen to be here. It is not a mistake or punishment or a fluke, but a unique and precious opportunity for your soul to grow in the ways it wishes to grow. Everything you are experiencing is either what your soul has chosen or what your soul is allowing you to experience, because your ego has created it, which you will learn from. You are always having the right experience for your growth, and that growth is leading toward being the loving being you can be. This earth is a school for love, and that is what I came to teach then and now.
Gina, thank you for bringing Jesus' message to us, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.